I was very devoted to the works of George Bernard Shaw, and in one of his prefaces to when he wrote, they published some of his criticism, he wrote that more people went to the theater in London in the 1890s when he wrote criticism than went to church. This would be a very good thing if the theater took itself seriously as a factory of thought, an armory against despair and dullness, an elucidator of social conduct, and a temple for the ascent of man. Well, I was very open to being inspired at that time, and I still am. And that inspired me. So I began to think, what can I do? And I thought, well, I can start a theater where I'm only doing plays that it would be a waste if they weren't done, but yet they're not going to be done because they're not commercial. They're not going to make money on Broadway. A man came to me and he said, listen, he said, I'm an Episcopal priest. And he was wearing his collar. And he said, you want to do in the theater what I'm doing in religion. I had a church in St. Croix where I experimented with the arts. We ought to combine. And he said, I know of a church that's not being used in Hell's Kitchen in New York City on the West 46th Street called St. Clement's. I'm going to try to get that. It turns out he was also related to Tennessee Williams because his name was Sidney Lanier. And Sidney Lanier is a famous poet from the South. And Tennessee Williams' real name was Thomas Lanier Williams. He was the Lanier. And he and Sidney were friendly. And so the idea was, Sidney said, we might be able to get St. Clement's Church. It could be my church, and I'll be a mission to the arts, and we'll be host to the American, and had a name for it. I was very influenced by Alfred Stieglitz, who had An American Place from about 1917 on, which he only showed American artists and to do something about American artists. And I wanted to do something about American writers, who were seriously writing for the theater. Well, in order to get St. Clement's Church, I had to speak to people from the diocese, the Episcopal diocese in New York City. And an interview was arranged with a bishop, Bishop Corrigan. And Bishop Corrigan was the home bishop. And he was the bishop for the outlying areas. This was, now we're in 1961, 62 period. So I went to the diocese headquarters and met with Bishop Corrigan. And I really hit it off with him. He knew all about Alfred Stieglitz. And he said, but I want to know one thing. Is what you want to do really needed? Well, that was my stuff. Yes, it's really needed, because that's the question I had been asking myself all this time. What is needed? So I was very full in responding to what I wanted to do in the theater and with the American Place Theater at St. Clement's Church. That's what we would do. Well, Sam Shepard, I went to see a play of his that ran about 25 minutes. It was called Red Cross at Judson Church. That was the only, St. Clement's was very early in being a church that started to get used as a theater, while they kept the church services, by the way. And I saw it, and I felt he was very talented, and I said, you know, I'd like to see your work, more of your plays. And so he came to me with La Turista, which it was a 3-act play at that time, and we talked about it, and then I made some points to him. I didn't think it would make radical changes, but he said, no, I'm throwing everything out except the first act. So I said, we're going into rehearsal. Well, we were in rehearsal while he's writing the second act. And I see him banging the drums around the church all day. I said, when are you writing? We got to have a second act, and you're writing all day, banging the drums all day. I said, I write it late at night, which he did, and the play was brilliant. And I did several of his plays after that. And after that, we did have critics, and some of them were very hostile because his plays were not fitting into conformist kind of theater. And some of the critics didn't like him at all. One of them, I think he was at the Daily News. Oh, by that time I had a theater in the basement, in the underground. My theater moved from St. Clement's to a theater that was mostly below ground, under a skyscraper. And he said, fill that hole up with ashes and seal it. He was so angry. But right after that, Sam won the Pulitzer Prize for Buried Child. So he now became not establishment, but he was accepted. And what I had wanted, what I did my theater for, was to get his kind of theater, new theater, original kind of dramas that didn't follow the old formula into the circulation of American theater. And there you are, Buried Child getting a Pulitzer Prize. Well, some of the actors who worked at my theater, I knew from my classes, and they were damn good. For example, one of the leads in The Old Glory, the first production, was Frank Langella, who was a young actor who was in my class, and I thought he'd be very right as Captain Benito Sereno. And so he auditioned, and it made me feel good when Robert Lowell turned to me and said, yes. And Frank talks about it, about how this is an audition. And I said, Frank, you have the part. He couldn't believe it. He just auditioned and he was that good. Joel Grey was my student, and he was in the second play, in Harry Noonan Night. And Joel Grey went on to fame, Cabaret, he won Oscar, Tonys, etc. I did a Sam Shepard play as part of a whole evening called Killer's Head, and I had a young student I thought would be terrific in it, and he was, Richard Gere. That's what Literature to Life does. It whets the appetite for reading because it gives them an hour experience with a book. That's a prose book, which I take and only adapt by excerpting from the book, but using only the author's words, because their words are better than mine would ever be. And using the author's words, and to go back to what Sanford Meisner taught me, it's organic. To get the actors to inhabit the roles to the degree where they are really living the roles. And by living the roles, they are magnetizing the audience. The audience gets caught up with the real experience. And not only do they live the role of the protagonist, but of every other character that's in the adaptation. We call it an adaptation, I call it that, but it's a way of taking a book and using excerpts from it and putting them in dramatic juxtapositions that bring out theater and only using the words of the audience. What I do is I put it into the present tense, because drama is in the present tense. This is not staying, books, novels are back in the past tense. I put them in the present tense, and also use the first person, I. So when we begin the book we're doing here in Nantucket, on Sunday night is the things they carried. He introduces himself. I'm Tim O'Brien. I'm him, and this is so he grabs you. This is his story of his experience as a Vietnam soldier. Well, we began Literature to Life in 1992 with Toni Morrison's book, The Bluest Eye. And then we did Black Boy by Richard Wright. And around this time I began to think, I've created a form of theater which is unique, and it's my creation. And I'm very pleased with the value of it, how valuable it is. Then I realized that William Shakespeare, who knew everything, said it all. What I was doing, he knew, and he wrote about it in the prologue to Henry V, when he had to have the audience is going to be watching the battles on the stage. He gave the chorus who introduces the play Henry V these words: on your imaginary forces work. Think when we talk of horses that you see them printing their proud hooves in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. With a wit supply, admit me, chorus. And so he even said the hour. So I'm doing the Literature of Life, it runs an hour. He says, permit me, it's all in an hourglass. I can give you this.